Welcome to another episode of From the Mount, a podcast from the campus of Mount Perrin Christian School. I am your host, Steve Kyle. With me in studio, the amazing co-host, Viola Lucier.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Viola, thanks for being on another episode. And I say this a lot. I don't think the plan is to never have an episode without you. I mean, that's the plan. However, that may not always happen.
Yeah.
Because, well, we're different people with different schedules. But
Correct.
The plan will be always have Viola. So if you're listening and she's the reason why, just keep listening because the goal will be
at some point, I'll be back, yeah.
But we're also, we're not going to tell you when she's not going to be there, just in case, you know what I mean? Like, I still want your family to listen.
Exactly.
And hopes you make a surprise entrance. But
hey, Meemaw.
So as much as we have had, it's always been amazing, and I always say it's so great, we have someone honestly more amazing in the studio today. And I can only say that because it's my wife joining us as a guest. So let's welcome Cindy Kyle to the podcast. Cindy,
Hi,
welcome.
Guys. Hi.
Glad to have you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. That's right. It is New Year's, and we're going to be having a New Year episode, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. It doesn't have to be. You might decide to have a word midway through the year. But this is our What's Your Word episode. And some of you might be going, what in the world is this? I want a word.
Right.
I need a word.
I have some words.
Yeah, exactly.
Plural.
But we might not. This might not be that episode.
Yeah.
But Cindy, thank you for joining us on this episode. It's not that you're necessarily a words expert or not a words expert. We just said I needed someone who loves Jesus.
Yes.
Who takes who actually does have a word.
Check.
But also is really, really good with words. And I do know
you
that
are
being
really
married,
good with words.
married to you for going on 27 years. I've heard lots of your words, good, bad, all of them. I've heard them all. And I've deserved them. So, but today's episode is called "What's Your Word?" Now, for those listening, because you just listened to every episode and you have no idea really what this is about, we're going to talk a little bit about this. Yeah, I know. Thank you if you're just a regular listener. But this is every year at the beginning of every new year, I'm assuming, does anyone even know? I should have done research on this. How long have New Year's resolutions been a thing? Do we even know that?
I don't know. I feel like I should know that, and I don't.
Yeah,
As a
maybe
history
while
person?
we're doing this, I'll do a quick Google search to see if I can find that out. But while I'm gonna start by saying, of course, it's the time of year where everybody says, "Hey, it's a brand new year, new year, new me, new opportunities." So, first of all, do you guys do resolutions of any kind? If so, not that you want to bring them up on here, and we're not going to talk at length about what your specific ones are, but what are your thoughts on resolutions? Do you use them? Have you used them? All that kind of stuff. Go.
So I love new things. I am not that person who's like, oh, I hate change. I love New Year's. I love new school years. So I'm that kind of person. If I buy a planner, which I love to have a paper planner, I will buy one in December or January for that year. And then when the new school year starts, I buy a completely different new one and I toss the old one. So I never completely fill out a whole entire planner because I just love new things. And I love setting intentions and resolutions and goals. I'm all about that. So it makes me a little sad when some people are kind of naysayers about it because I just love New Year's.
So at the beginning of the new year, you're like, yes, I've got, okay. Cindy, where are you? And again, I'm asking this like I don't know. I do know a little bit about this, but tell the 7 people listening.
I do like to have New Year's resolutions, and I have categories of them. So I have like a spiritual, physical, family, and so forth, financial, whatever. And I do like to do them. And I grew up in a church that one of the verses that they frequently would quote is where there is no vision, the people perish.
Yeah, that's a good
from
one.
Proverbs, and it was constantly forecasting like where do you want to be in January 2025 from this year compared to January 2024, And so I like them. And I love a new school year. I love a
Yes.
clean slate. And I guess that's what January kind of represents to me. I know there's nothing mystical about January 1st, but it just symbolizes a clean slate.
Right.
Yeah, I
New
like
beginning.
a new school year. As a kid, I got a new Trapper Keeper.
Yeah.
Oh, I love those.
For
Yeah, it
school
was-
supplies or where it's
Yeah,
at.
the pockets and all the cool stuff. So while you guys were talking and I was listening, I did some quick research. Turns out New Year's resolutions have been around for almost 4,000 years.
Wow.
That, listen, the Babylonians were some of the first people to record celebrations in honor of the new year and talking about like maybe what people group they were going to dominate or take over, I imagine.
I'm not
All
sure
right,
that's a good
Next,
thing.
yeah.
Oh, is
We're
it?
doing what Babylon does.
Yeah, this year we're gonna a new level of debauchery. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't.
Those Acadians were coming for them.
But still, 4,000 years, people have been, I guess, setting resolutions and failing miserably at them.
Wow.
So here's what I'm not anti-resolution. So hear me. I think the people are like, oh, I do them. I feel like some people keep this kind of like, I'm better than you because I do them, because I better
Right.
myself every year. I don't. I look at this and go, listen, if I wasn't eating broccoli December 31st, I ain't eating it on January 1st. That's how I
Okay.
feel about it. I'm like, why am I going to wait? I'm like gorging on chocolate going, January 1st is coming. For me, that's how I've always looked at it. And I just like, why do I want to start the year pre-setting myself to fail somewhere?
But your resolutions, you can have resolutions that have no food in them
Agreed.
whatsoever.
Yeah, you can do that. You can have other ones too. But I think you can make the application. If I wasn't being nice on December 31st, I'm not going to be
Like-
nice on January.
Well,
Not me.
But that's
yeah.
not.
There's
like,
gotta be a
that's not
starting point.
measurable. You need to have measurable goals.
Yeah,
ooh,
yeah.
data.
that's- Okay. Now let's save this lecture for home. Okay. Let's right now talk about what this episode is, and so more recently, I think at least, has been this discussion on like what is your word? What's your word for 2023? And so more recently, less about a kind of a general or kind of this specific list of things to do has been a word that's going to define what this upcoming year will be for me, a focal point. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of been a new thing. And again, I don't know for how long, but I know it's not been, I don't remember hearing about what's your word
No.
since I've been a kid.
For
sure.
4,000 years, no.
Yeah, no, I don't think. So do you guys with this what your word and essentially what this is and people, this is not something that only people of faith do. This is something that all kinds of people do at various levels. They choose one word or a couple of words, maybe categorically, like you had mentioned. Maybe my word for physical, my word for spiritual, my word for you know, there might be people who choose multiple words, but more of it's one word to define this upcoming year, whatever that year is. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Now, are you word people also?
Actually, it's ironic because I was never a word person until last year. And then right when we came back, you did something on words. And so I was like, look at that. The
Yeah.
Holy Spirit put one in my heart just in time.
Just in time.
Just in time.
Cindy, what about you?
So this is a new thing for me too. Fairly, this is the third year that I've done a word. So no, it hasn't been. And for me, the first time I ever heard anyone really talk about it from a Christian perspective was John Eldridge on his Wild at Heart podcast, and it's something that he prays about throughout the month of December and through the month of January if he still doesn't have it. And so that's where I kind of got the inclination that I think that would be a really positive thing to do.
Yeah, and same for me. Although I've never been a person who has, I shouldn't say never. There were obviously times I did resolutions. The word thing has been easier, and I see there is and what's unusual. We'll get into this is how interesting and how often I noticed and saw and was reminded of that word literally from the very beginning. It was something I determined in January. And then as the year went along, I was like, oh my goodness, this devotion, this book, this thing that someone shared with me, this whatever it might be was enough. So before we get into maybe what your word is and how you kind of got to that point, there's always a word. I don't know if you guys know what the word of 2023 was. So every year at the end of the year, Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, it used to be a paper dictionary. Now it's all online, dictionary.com. They have a word, like a word that was used more than any other word last year.
I think I know it.
Both officially and unofficially. Do you know what that word, what do you maybe
I know
know?
2022s. I don't think I know 2023s.
Yeah, 2022s.
I know what that
we
one
did.
was.
Yeah,
Was 2023 Riz?
Interesting. I didn't know this. So Riz actually is the kind of unofficial kind of slang word on, and what's it come from, by the way?
Charisma.
Charisma. It
Yes.
does. It's a riff, they said, of charisma. But the word they actually went through, so Oxford University went with Riz.
Okay.
Merriam-Webster, which is, I think the United
US.
States. Yeah. Not that there's one better than the other, but we're going with that. Authentic.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Authentic was isn't there such irony maybe in that too? That that you could even say that there was, last year could have been the year of the fakes and phonies.
Right.
For authentic to be the word that they were using for that. And of course, Riz was the Oxford. So depending on where you go, it is those are the words that we're kind of defining of our culture, our society, maybe our world in some way. And we could have a whole probably podcast episode on what's really interesting about those words. So have you guys chosen words? Before we get into, by the way, if you're listening, why I'm going to kind of maybe share a case on why I think if you're a listener and don't yet have a word, it's not too late to pick a word, why it's important, and then how you can kind of go about doing that. So we'll get to that. But real quick, do you guys mind sharing what your word is?
Sure.
I don't, either one of you. We can go with our guest first.
Okay, so my word is new. And there's the verse associated with it is Isaiah 43:19. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert.
So I will say my word for this year is consistent. But I think that it has multiple meanings for me. So my grounding verse for that is 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. And so really someone defined self-discipline, which I would also consider being consistent, as like showing up for yourself every day. And I love that because in my prayer time, that's why consistent was given to me, was because like God is consistent. He's there and he does not leave. And any distance that I feel is distance that I have put into place. And so he shows up for me every day. And so part of my word consistent is me showing up for him every day. And for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of wrestled with this. You shared your word with me earlier, so I knew your word, and we had talked about. I did not share my word with you, and I've been wrestling kind of with this because when I say the word that I have, you'll go, yep. And it was one I wrestled with some because of where I am. And I won't go into my whole story. My wife is well aware of this, but I, when there are times that, and I'm never willing to admit that it's a lack of this, but any time I'm in my own life and I feel either out of control, fearful, anything like that, it's always hard for me to admit that that actually comes down to trust. It actually comes down to, do I actually trust him? And as much as I hate even admitting that on the podcast, that for me, when I am afraid, and there are things that bring me fear, when I feel out of control, like, why can't I do this? It actually comes back to, Steve, the reason you're afraid, the reason you feel like you don't, is because do you trust me? If you don't trust me, and when I look back to this past year of all the times that my word last year was enough, and it was so amazing to see all that in the ways that he was enough and more than enough. The ways I still felt like out of control, fearful about certain things that certainly my wife would be aware of. But it came down to God convicting me, really saying, Steve, and I'm not proud to admit that it actually comes down to not that I'm not, that actually serving, doing what I do, and that do I not trust that he is who, and I wrestle with that. It's been great at my church. We've been kind of going through Psalms, and that's been really convicting and along this very area of trust. And of course the verses, one of my particular verse for me is a verse from Psalms that we're going to do in 56 is the verse, and it was all what's the word, crystallized maybe over this weekend. So for me, and so if you're listening, you're thinking right now, hey, why should I have a word? What's the point of having a word? And you guys can, of course, speak to this if you want. But I think there are three really quick things. One, I think it helps us provide focus.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Oh,
Absolutely.
It allows you to, if you have the word, I don't know if do you guys put your word up where you can see it?
I put my verse on my mirror, so the word obviously is in the verse.
Yeah. So where
It's in my noggin.
Yeah. And to put it, I hung last year's word on my office wall and plan to do the same, the verse and the word. But I think it allows us to focus. It allows us to dial in on that specific area.
Right.
So if your word is new, your word is whatever it is, balance, and remember, it doesn't have to be some really super deep biblical word. There are biblical principles, and we'll talk about that. But it will provide focus. So if you're like, I'm not really a resolutions guy or girl, that's fine. What about a word person? And say, well, if I had this word posted everywhere, and all it allowed me to do is focus over and over and over again. Number two, I think it provides motivation.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Does it motivate you?
Yeah.
How does it motivate you?
Well, it's funny because last year my word was capable, and I really focused on the fact that, like, if God was going to give me something and put me in a situation, he has equipped me with what I need. And I mentally am 22 years old, so things would happen and I'd look around and be like, we need an adult. And then I'm like, wait, I'm the adult. Hold on.
Yeah.
So there were times my word last year was more intervention than prevention. So it was very, in that moment, I mean, I'd be totally wigging out and then I'd say, okay, I am capable. Like, he has created me to deal with this specific moment. And so first go to him, and then second, like, whatever I got to do, like, that's what I got to do. And I'm capable to do it because he has given me that. So that's why I love the word more than I love a resolution, because the resolution is lengthy and there's steps and there's things.
Yeah, often.
The word is just, nope, I got to be consistent today. Like I said, I promise God, Lord, I'll be consistent for you because you're consistent for me. And so when I don't want to do something, you said consistent, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think accountability. I think, by us sharing our word with each other, and we can keep each other accountable. Cindy, you can say to me, remember your word. Once we do that, and that's why I encourage you, if you have a word, don't be like, well, it's my word. And it's probably like, if you can't share it with people, it's probably not a good word.
Right.
Okay. But it's accountability. It's helpful to be able to say, hey, I want you to call me out when I'm not reflecting this word. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It is, and it's particularly so, I think, for you and me in that my word. So I have a love-hate relationship with change. So I love beginnings, but I don't necessarily enjoy endings. So I struggle with the transition periods, and if I'm really comfortable, God really has to do a work in me to get me to move on from something that I'm comfortable with. And so, like, for instance, our daughter's getting married in of 2024. It's so wonderful. We adore him. It's going to be great, but it's a transition. It's a big transition. And so I think there's a part of that, but it's more than just that. It's not getting comfortable where I am spiritually. God wants to do a new work in us constantly. He constantly wants to do a new thing in us, and not to just settle in on what we have and be try to be stagnant, because you can't be. You're either moving forward or backward. There's no such thing as, standing still in the Christian walk anyway.
Right.
And so for me, with living with the person that knows the word and will hold me accountable, and knowing how resistant I can be to change just because it makes me uncomfortable, it is a way for accountability and motivation, as well, and focus. All of those things, I think, are great reasons for choosing to do it.
So there you go. If you got your word, that's what you need to tell your significant other, your best friend, your accountability partner, hey, here's my word, and I want you to prayerfully help me keep this at the forefront. So if you're listening, as we kind of wrap this, as we kind of bring, you're like, I want to do this now. I've heard enough from Viola, from Cindy, like they've convinced me I need a word. And you're, well, by the way, you can use someone else's word. You might be listening, but I need to come up with, you might go, new is for me.
Right.
It might be God used this podcast to give you these words. But a couple things, if you're listening and you're like, I want to begin this journey of my finding my word. It doesn't have to be this really long, drawn out thing. Number one, I would strongly encourage, obviously, if you're listening and you're a person of faith, you got to seek God in prayer about this. God, what word do you want? Don't just pick a word that sounds cool.
Right.
Where you saw it on a mug and that was just like, But it's actually one for you. So I think that, and Scripture says that. Proverbs, talks about God giving wisdom and direction if we seek Him to be able to do that He is the source of all wisdom. Mm-hmm. And certainly I think will give us that that word. Number two, I think reflecting on your past year, which I think both of you are these words you've chosen kind of a result of not just, I'm just randomly picking something. It's a result of kind of what we're walking, maybe what we've walked through and how we felt and where God has brought us to where we are in this moment.
Yes, I would say that. And I would say mine mostly came from number one, which was just really being in prayer and trying to hear what God says directly to me.
Yeah. Got it.
Same. I didn't know what my word was going to be, and I was actually listening to a sermon in Isaiah 43, and my eyes fell on that verse, and it was like, click, that was what it was supposed to be. So, yeah, I think that all of those things can be catalyst.
Yeah. I think search the Scriptures.
Yes.
Dig into the Word. If you just want to find that word, read the Bible. I mean, hopefully you're doing that anyway.
Right.
But search the Scriptures for the word and then anchor that word with verses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't have to be just one, but if you choose a word, make sure it's not just like I'm choosing fitness. And then you're like, how am I going to be fitting this Bible verse to make it? Not that fitness is a bad one.
That's good.
But make sure that, I think, again, as Christ followers, we should have that biblical foundation. So, and there are a lot, it doesn't have to actually say the word. It doesn't have to include new or trust in it. There are so many words we could choose that are...
Well, hers was consistent, but her verse didn't say specifically consistent.
Yeah.
Or it could be faithful, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there were a lot of different,
correct. Yeah. So, but I think it's really important we anchor the verse and include that as part of what you're doing, because I think it's the truth of God's word that's really going to anchor that verse, drive it home, not just my own memorization skills, but man, the word of God being in me over these. I need more than one verse or two in this case on trust. I need to have a wall of trust verses having to do with that. And then, of course, you want to commit it to the Lord. Pray about that word. Lord, make this a priority. Make it and then share it. Share it with other people. Share it with as many people as you can share it with, because it would be just cool to go, oh, we have the same word, or I'm going to encourage you with your word, or as someone even did for me this year, they bought me the thing that hangs on my word. It was a gift somebody gave me with my verse framed with the thing, and they were like, well, here's a gift. But that kind of thing is a thing we can do for each other to be able to say, hey, let's encourage each other. So I think it's important that we kind of make that determination and go, let's do it. I mean, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Any kind of closing words? If you're anything you want to add?
I have something. I want to encourage too. If you are uncomfortable with the first word that comes to mind, that's probably your word.
Ooh.
Because whenever new I was like, oh, I don't want that because I don't want God shaking things off.
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, I get it, Lord. That's why I need that.
Yeah.
Because my reaction was, oh, I'm not doing that. And then just know that just if it makes you really uncomfortable.
So somebody's
so
word
funny.
is going to be moist.
Oh, stop
Because
it.
that makes everybody
Oh,
uncomfortable.
my goodness.
You know, that I felt that about consistent too, because that is something I am not. I am consistently inconsistent.
Yeah, inconsistent. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
inconsistent.
It's okay.
That's
You
fine.
can
The
say
unconsistentness is.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal, ladies. First of all, thank you for sharing your insight.
you.
And we've shared our word with a number of people now, so it's going to be out there. But if you're listening, we certainly want you to be in prayer. What will your word be for 2024? And I do want to thank you for listening to another episode of From the Mount.